Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Heritage Talks. It's a program by the Quebec Anglophone Heritage Network. My name is Heather Darch, and I'm a project director for Quan. Our series this season has had its theme, Sharing Our Heritage, and we've been discovering inspiring stories from across Quebec. And we've been speaking to people and asking them about the projects and exhibitions going on in their historical societies, their museums, archives, community organizations, and cultural groups that have had a lasting impact not only on their own community, but on Quebec's history. Quan itself is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to preserve and protect the history of Quebec, but in particular of Quebec's English-speaking communities spread right across the province. And of course, you are welcome to become a member of our great network. And right now we have a 30% discount on the books so that you can become a member for only $20 for a one-year membership. And membership gives you access to all sorts of programs and to our quarterly publication called Quebec Heritage News, which is written by local historians and professional historians with wonderful images all about Quebec's history and maybe even in your corner of Quebec as well. So if you'd like to become a member and learn all about us and the communities that we represent, please go to our website at qahn.org and click on our membership page and sign yourself up for our 30% discount deal. I'd like to thank our funders who help present this particular program. It's Canadian Heritage, the Zeller Family Foundation, and the Townshippers Foundation. And all of our presentations are recorded so that if you've missed any and would like to go back and review the files, you certainly can. And tonight's presentation is recorded as well. And you can go to our public Facebook page. That means that you don't have to have a Facebook page of your own. You can just go on to Quan's Facebook page and watch the programs all over again. And if you're interested in signing up for our next program, you can do that from Facebook as well, or from our website, qahn.org. Now, if you're joining us on Zoom tonight, I'm going to ask you to please keep your cameras turned off. You're muted right now, but if you keep your cameras turned off, that really helps our internet network be a little more successful. When we're finished, I invite you to please turn your cameras back on. And if you have any questions, you can go to the reactions button at the bottom of your Zoom screen and click on that and use the raise hand feature. That will show you a little yellow hand in the box so that we know you have a question. Or you can use the chat box at the bottom of the screen as well. And you can type in your comments and questions, and we'll make sure that our guest speakers will get the message and answer your question. And if you're joining us on Facebook tonight, please tell us where you're joining from. And if you have comments or questions, we will try to pass those on as well. So let's find out what's happening tonight. Our guest speakers today are Louise Abbott, Eileen Schofield, and Garland Nadeau. Louise Abbott is the author of The Coastway, a portrait of the English on the lower north shore of the St. Lawrence. In the late 1990s, she served as a consultant to the Whiteley Museum when it was just getting off the ground. Since 2022, she has collaborated with the museum on producing short documentaries about the traditional and contemporary way of life in and around St. Paul's River. She is currently creating Islands of History, an illustrated book about the archipelagos of Old Fort and Blanc-Sablon. Eileen Schofield is the president of the Whiteley Museum. Now retired, she worked for 20 years as an educator and 15 years as a school principal. Originally from Montreal, Eileen graduated from McGill University in 1982 and then came to work in St. Paul's River. She became involved with the Whiteley Museum as she wanted to help preserve the culture and stories of the coast. Garland Nadeau is a local historian and storyteller from St. Paul's River. He's also the vice president of the Whiteley Museum. We welcome the three of you tonight with your presentation called welcome to the Whiteley Museum. Hello, Louise, Eileen, and Garland, and welcome to Heritage Talks.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, just go ahead when you're ready. That's just fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather.
Okay, we were just going to, I think there's going to be a map coming up, Heather. There you go.
Okay, I have to start.
Yes, sir.
Okay, my name is like Heather just said, is Garland Nadeau. I'm the local historian somewhat, and lived in St. Paul's River for most of my life. St. Paul's River is on the lower north shore of Quebec, the Basse-Côte Nord. Anybody familiar with Quebec? For most of us, it's 7 islands, Sept-Îles, and then you go another 500 miles east of that. We're right on the border with Newfoundland. St. Paul's is about an hour's drive from the Newfoundland border, and we're close to Newfoundland Island. So anybody looking up Newfoundland, you know, we're just there. We have a road. We're connected by road from a small village just to the west of us, 6 miles to the west, which is called View 4. And we have Route 138 that connects with Newfoundland, comes down through Nova Scotia, heads up towards the townships wherever. We also have the Trans-Labrador Highway that connects the small communities of Labrador, comes up around Lab City, Shefferville, Goose Bay, comes down to Baie-Comeau. So we're not as isolated as some other remote communities on the lower North Shore. We have a road connection, and the Whiteley Museum is located in St. Paul's River in the municipality of Bonne Esperance. And the municipality of Bonne Esperance is comprised or composed of 3 villages: Old Fort, Middle Bay, and St. Paul's. Middle and Old Fort being in the middle. Old Fort being 6 miles to the western, Middle Bay being about the same to the eastern. And this is the municipality. It's called the municipality of Bonne Esperance for a reason. That's where Mr. Whiteley set up his fishing establishment in the 1800s, but we'll get to that later. So this is where we live. It's called, Bob Belvin wrote a book a few years ago called The Forgotten Labrador, but I don't think we're forgotten anymore. There were times when we felt that nobody knew where we were or whatever, but that's changed now. We feel like we're a part of the global community. So welcome everybody, and thanks.
Okay, so that on the screen you can see a beautiful picture. That's one of Louise's beautiful pictures, or Neil's. Yeah, her husband Niels, who's the drone artist, took a nice picture when they were visiting of our village. Of course, it always looks better when the sky is blue and the water is calm. So just picture us like that. It's not always like that, but we would like to think it is. Anyway, so the Whiteley Museum was incorporated as a nonprofit organization in 1993, right around the time when the fishing was taking a massive downturn. A group of interested citizens tried to diversify the economy, wanted to create something to diversify the economy for tourism, but also to collect and to preserve the heritage and the stories that are of the Whiteleys, because that was a story. Bossy Whiteley came originally from England to Boston and then moved up here, and he was the one. He had a very a thriving enterprise out on the island of Bonne Espérance. And he was credited of inventing the cod trap, which revolutionized the method of catching cod. So this group got together. They were fortunate. They got a grant from the Federal Museum Assistance Programs, got this together, and Louise was drawn in shortly. So her attachment to the coast and to the Whiteley Museum is long lived, and thank goodness for that for us. So they got together, they got a museum going. It was beautiful. They have a beautiful collection. We're sitting in it right now. Unfortunately, as things happen after a period of time, funding was harder to get. volunteers got tired, so the museum actually was closed down for a while. And then enter Garland, myself, and a group of other citizens who decided, let's try to get this going again. And we've been very fortunate in getting the museum up and running, and then connecting with Louise to get some of the stories digitally recorded so that we can preserve these for posterity. And trying to go onto the internet and have people being able to access these stories, even if you don't get to visit us in person. So that's where we are right now. And we have Louise is going to introduce a couple of her videos that she's done. She's going to share them with us.
Well, I'll just say, Eileen, that what we're seeing on the screen now is a screen grab from a multimedia project that was done for the museum. We completed that in the spring of 2022, and it includes several short documentaries, mini documentaries, I call them, about traditional life and culture on the coast, in particular in the St. Paul's River area. And I thought we could start our presentation this evening with a short documentary, which is about the Whiteley Museum and about local history, a thumbnail sketch, and it features none other than Garland Nadeau.
Jacques Cartier, when he traveled the coast in 1534 on his voyage of discovery, made an allusion that this was the land that God gave to Cain, and not one cartload of soil could be found on the old territory. But he referenced beautiful arbors along the Basse-Côte Nord, or the lower North Shore of Quebec. You know, the Europeans, the Basques, the Normans, the Britons, when they came over from Europe, they had to have a good food supply. Another thing, wood for cooking and things. To repair the ships, they needed wood supply. Go up St. Paul's River 3 miles, you're into a forest. You look at the salmon that were so abundant, cod and everything else. You look at the islands, the eggs, the eider ducks, probably the Labrador duck, which is extinct now at the time, were abundant on the islands. The seals were abundant, the whales were abundant. So when they got in these harbors, it was paradise for them. Because the Europeans were so entrenched, it drove out a lot of the indigenous people unless they were willing to trade with them. And as you know, there was conflict between the Inuit, the Innu, and the French. And so 1820 was when really settlement opened up here in Bonne Espérance. And Bon Esperance Harbor is probably one of the best harbors of anywhere along this coastline. Well, the reason why that Bossy Whiteley became so predominant within the cod fishery itself is not only the fact that he was a good fisherman, but he came up with the American schooner fleet, and they were seining at the time, what they call seining and anlining and probably trawling. But he transformed that old fishery all through Newfoundland, all through the Maritimes with the invention of the cod trap. And that also transformed the old coastline around here, because independent people were able to fish by themselves. With a cod trap, you could, you had the means to a living. It's a barren land. I think Jacques Cartier is right. There's probably not much soil. But we are hospitable and very open and hospitable to outsiders, and it's nice to see people coming in and respect and appreciate history, and it's a good history.
There we go. Okay, that was beautiful, Louise. Of course, it's so nice to see. I love the how you captured it. Of course, this guy said, I think you got the same hat on. I was kind of noticing that, Carla.
Continuity.
That's right. So, like we said, the Whiteley Museum was named to commemorate the Whiteley family, particularly William Henry Whiteley, who did develop the cod trap, as was mentioned in the film. And it played an important role not only in local history, but in the history of Newfoundland and all the other parts of Atlantic Canada that did fish cod, because it just revolutionized the way cod was fished. The museum commissioned another short film by Louise for the Whiteley family salt cod business on the island, not far from St. Paul's River.
Yeah, I was going to say about that film that I was very lucky that back in the 1990s, I was in touch with various members of the Whiteley family, the extended Whiteley family. And one of them out in British Columbia had actually gone to St. John's and with a home video camera had recorded an interview with Mary Whiteley, who was 93 at the time and just absolutely charming. And I was able to rescue the audio. The video was, pretty rough. All I had was a VHS transfer of a very low-end home video camera. But to have her memories that stretched back to Bossy Whiteley, she was a baby when Bossy died, but she was out at Bon Esperance in 1902, his last summer on Bonne Espérance. And she continued to go out to the island because her father was Skipper George, and he ended up running the business with two of his brothers, but I think he was a predominant member of the family after Bossy Whiteley's death. And in the book that I'm working on, I have photographs of her from 1909, and you can see as a little girl the same charm that you could see, at 93. So this short film is called Memories of Bonne Espérance with Mary Whiteley.
There was no place like it. I don't know any of my friends who had a place like this.
On the 13th of May, I arrived at Bonne, and I went on the river the very next day. 'Twas Banbury River where we were consigned. We had one boat for wood and another for iron. The job being over and fishing began, we had some fine boats and a fine crew of men. To make up our wages, we all were inclined with 2 boats and 3 cod seines, our hooks and our line.
And off we'd go on the train to Huppermouth and get on the boat, and down we'd go to Bon Esperance, to Boney, we always call it. We'd stay there all summer. And there's my sister Margaret and grandfather Whiteley, and this is the Boney house. His grandma Whiteley and the 2, whoever the help was that summer, there they are. You had complete and utter freedom. You had a little boat of your own, and out you'd go. You could row it or you could sail it. Then you learned to swim. It was a wonderful life for children. Nobody bothered you at all. They were all so busy.
Oh, to tell all their names, it would cause you to smile. We had him, Sam, and Jeff that belonged to Belle-Isle. We had 3 from Breakers to Flower of the Flock, and Big Bertha from Topsail with her cotton frock.
The fish were caught in traps and brought back, thrown up on the stagehead at Bon Esperance. They were forked up into boxes, and they were split and salted and then spread, put on those, what they call the flakes, and hard dried, and of course eventually sold. And the dried fish would be put aboard the boat and sailed over to France or over to Spain, because that's where they would eat it, you see. This, of course, is the way I remember it. All that has been swept away, and I don't suppose that a stick or stone left at the house, there wouldn't be. Oh my, oh my, oh my. Of course, the point is that the island will be there, just saying.
I should add that I think for me, going out to the island now, it's so astonishing to see that there's really nothing left. I mean, there's just a bit of rubble, and that so many lives were lived there, and we have the photographic documentation of all these people who lived out there and worked there and played there and loved there and dreamed there. And it's a beautiful island.
Salt cod. Okay, I think I'm supposed to say something about salt cod. Well, I guess salt cod was the mainstay, the staple of who we are. Without cod, I don't think any of us would probably be here. So you can't say anything more poignant than the fact that cod, salmon, but cod in particular, that's why Bonnie is there, was because of cod. That's why the coast is there, is because of cod. So we owe a deep gratitude to the cod, and it's something that probably is so sad today, is that we don't see cod today. I haven't jug a codfish in 2 years, and one time they were here by the millions, and it's just where how things could be. Well, you look at Boney and you see Boney, and it's just the buildings and the life and the vibrancy. You hear Mary Whiteley talk about that, the freedom and everything else. It was just a beautiful life, but now today it's become something else. So I only have a minute, so I won't take too long. I'll talk more when we get into transhumance. But anyway, salt cod, we can't say enough about salt cod and what it meant to the old North Shore, and in particular, and all that Labrador and Newfoundland.
And we have a short film. It features, among others, a man in his 90s called Percival Cates. And of course, it was Garland that introduced me to all the people in the film. And it was wonderful to have their firsthand testimony in this short film called Salt Cod.
Cod trap, trawl, hand lines, jigger, every way you could get a fish. I was born July the 15th, 1930. I was born at Salmon Bay, to Grandpa's. The day I was born, Grandpa took his trap from Salmon Bay and put her up to Bonnie. And the day I was born, he had 75 kindle fish. Our life then was only a boat and fish.
Back in the day, we moved from St. Paul's to Salmon Bay for fishing. And the fishing was just out around, so it was close. The men were fishing, so they go early in the morning. Some women, I know there was one lady home that fished with her husband, Hazel Keats. She fished with her husband, Frank Keats.
Well, I was fishing when I was about 7, 8 years old. Used to jig and get so tired I'd go to sleep in the boat. Sometimes it was rough and it'd be cold, it'd be soaking wet, the water and flying over you, and rain.
They went in the morning and they came and they go back again in the afternoon. So they'd be up late in the night. It was a lot of cod, so they kept them busy at the cod, right? They'd fill up the stage, and it was a lot of hard work. They'd be up all hours in the night. They had to get lanterns and to put down the stage to see what they were doing. You take it out of the boat, put it on the stage head, and then they put it in the splitting house, and then one would cut throat, one would head, one would split, and they put it in a tub of water to wash it, and then the salter would come out and get it with a wheelbarrow, put it in the wheelbarrow, and bring it in the stage to salt.
I'd help my mom and my aunt Mary salt, so we would wheel in when we were able. As youngsters, we would only like maybe put half so that we could get used to bringing it in, because it was just a little narrow place to bring it in, you know.
Whatever the old people done, we was kids and we just watched them. And whatever they done, we done same.
When it came time in the fall when they would sell the fish, because it was salted fish, so it had to be washed, so we would help with that. And then we would be the drying period, so every morning about 6 o'clock we had to be up and spread all this fish all over the rocks, or they had what they call slips also of wood, and sometimes it was on there, but there on Pineapple we were lucky because there were lots of rocks, and that did a better drying job than, you know, on the wood. So that was it. And then if it rained during the day, everyone ran to get the fish in, and you know, it was a constant thing that you had to be caring for that until it was actually sold, because it had to go through this 3-day, at least 3 days, if not longer, of good drying, good heat. And you had to bring it all back to the stage, and then they would stack it in a big pile to be ready to ship. Mostly, I think they were sold to Newfoundland buyers, but they got very little for their cod at that point.
I thought that was the only thing in the world was fish. We had a good life back then. We had a good life and bad life. There was times we had it really hard, and then we had, we thought it was a good life. I don't know.
My turn? Okay, it's my turn about transhumance, and I got 5 minutes, and I want to probably go a little bit longer, but I want to say something before I start on transhumance about somebody that's very special to us all. She's probably more of a coaster than anybody that's a coaster right now. It's Louise Abbott. The work 40 years ago, she came there, and I was with her then. I don't know how we ever met. It's probably because she lived next door with my Aunt Mary and Uncle John. And we tried to figure it out, but we don't know. But I was with her on a lot of those first images in her book, The Coast Way. And she acknowledged me, and it was kind of strange. About a year ago or 2 years ago, her friend came in, Nadia, and I didn't have a clue who Nadia was, and like they came in for the Coasters Association, and with Hugh Maynard and Kathy Brown from the Anglophone Secretariat development agent. And anyway, we were looking at building a new boardwalk, so we had to go up and meet the mayor. I'm a councillor, so I said, let's go up and see if we can get Kathy Brown to help us with the boardwalk, see if we could get a new one. And on the way up, her friend Nadia said, Garland, Louise Abbott acknowledged you in her book, The Coast Way. And I said, God damn right, she should have acknowledged me. Christ, I was with her for most of So it was funny. And then she said, well, you know, Garland, Louise is my best friend. And I go, wow, I hadn't heard from Louise for about 40 years, and I figured she was living in Hollywood with all the films and everything that's going on. I knew she had become quite famous after she had left, but we'd lost contact. And anyway, I was all happy and excited, and I said, well, say hi to Louise for me when you go back to Sherbrooke, please. And anyway, she did. And Christmas Day that year, I got a call, and that little soft voice of Louise that says, Garland, it's Louise. She still does it to me yet. She says, Garland, it's Louise, as if I don't know by now it's Louise Abbott. But anyway, that's how it started out. And for the last 2 years, I've gotten to know Louise. I've gotten to know her husband, Niels, and it's been a real treat and a pleasure for Eileen and I at the Whiteley Museum. We couldn't have been luckier, more fortunate to have somebody of that caliber. And I got to say, what she's pieced together, it's been exceptional. It's been beautiful. And we've had some some wonderful experiences with her. And Niels, I got to tell you, you're one special character, because I call Louise the boss, and she is the boss when she's filming. She knows what she's doing. So I just want to shout out to both of you that you're special people to us, and I just want you to realize that. Okay, now we have to talk about transhumance. When I was a boy in St. Paul's River, my dad ran the coal storage on Eskimo Island, and that was for freezing salmon, trout, and it was mostly salmon. And anyway, that's where the ship came in from Montreal about once a month, the North Pioneer, when I was there in the beginning. And anyway, I remember moving out to Eskimo Island. Well, I'd be lonely sometimes because most of the kids for Salmon Bay, Caribou Island, Stick Point, they all left early. But my dad had this little thing about education that, Garland, you had to stay in. And so I stayed with my parents and my grandparents in the village until the 21st of June. And by the 21st of June, I just wanted to get on Eskimo Island. I wanted to get out there before. So we called it moving in, moving out. And I always found that I always wanted to get to the island. I couldn't wait. On Eskimo Island, we had good running water. We had electric lights. We had freezing facilities. My Aunt Pearl next door sold Coke, chocolate bars, and ice cream. And so we had an exceptional sort of childhood compared to the rest, because we had things that were going on, like the ships coming in. The fishermen had to come there to get their salt for the salt, their cod. They had to come there. The people had to come there to pick up their groceries, you call it today, for the stores. The mail came there. So it was a vibrant little, almost like Boney was early. So I was very fortunate. I had time to read books and all that. But getting back to the main point, moving in, moving out. I didn't know what it was first until the anthropologists, archaeologists used to come down there from in the 1970s and 80s when I came back from Sherbrooke from school. And I worked with most of them, and they called it transhumance. I didn't know what transhumance was. But anyway, it was the island life. The old village pretty well, except for a few families like the Chevalier family, and they were even on the islands. But there was only one or two families that stayed. Every building, everything had the windows barred up. The stoves were taken out. You wouldn't see any stovepipes. And it was almost like a ghost town. And the life on the islands, it was vibrant. But I remember that I was in love with Leah Cates. Then Leah Cates was a beautiful little girl, and I was in love with her. And that was the worst thing I used to find when everybody moved out. Leah lived at Salmon Bay, and I lived on Eskimo Island. It was October or September before I got to see Leah again. And I figured I was going to marry her and have a family and everything else. Things never worked that way, but it's still something I talk with her when she comes home and visits every now and then. That it probably... But that was life on the islands, and it was a free life, a good life, and I'll never forget it. And it's something that's not there anymore now. It's more or less like in the cities where people go to the islands just for the weekend and enjoy a little bit of leisure time out there. But the fishing has changed. The life is not there anymore, but there's still things like picking bake apples, picking red berries. And I still go out to remember my mom who fished along the shoreline. She had 11 kids, and I guess to her, that was to keep her sanity. And I still go trout fishing with my rod and say, "Hi, Mom. Hi, Aunt Pearl," and all my ancestors that lived out there. And so that island life called transhumance, we called it moving in, moving out, was something that I always cherished. And thank God, I got to say, thank God, and I'll repeat it, that Louise has brought this full circle to me. I think the Quam did that little book image of that headstone out on Stick Point there. That was in the book. And Yolande, the historian from Bishop's University, she wrote that article, and that was in the French magazine and in the Quam magazine. And when I go out to Stick Point and see that little headstone of that young woman that died at 15, Martha Goddard, I'd always feel kind of sad and lonely, and it looked like something needed to be done. And when Quam published that book and Yolande did the article, I just said, gee, isn't this special? And to me, it was sort of always iconic, and it brought things around full circle, and I was just so happy. It's the same thing with Transhumans. Transhumans with Louise has brought this thing full circle to me. So actually, there's a few things else I want to accomplish, but I can die in peace now and thank to Louise that this thing got to the extent that, and I'm sure Eileen feels the same
No,
way.
I'm not dying yet, Carl. Forget that.
No, but as far as the,
You aren't either.
No, but as far as the old,
Yes, Louise has done an amazing job.
yeah, with the Whiteley Museum, with the interactive map, but that wouldn't have been possible without Louise. Our future is still uncertain. I think the coast right now is probably the most uncertain time that we've probably with climate change. We don't know, and it's a different life today. But thank God with Louise, I'll repeat again that we've got those images now, and and thank Quam for having this thing tonight that we can sit down and have a discussion about it. So I think my 5 minutes are up. I can talk all night, but I don't want to. I have to leave it for others. So I'll leave it at that and just say, thank you, everybody. Thanks, Louise. Thank you, Heather. And thank you, Allison, for putting this together. It's kind of neat.
I think we have to put now for a couple of films that actually address the issue of the seasonal migration or moving in and moving out. The first one is called The Seasonal Migration.
We're at my father's summer place. I haven't been here since my father passed in 2008. As I look around me, of course there's a lot of memories here. It was a very exciting time, you know, when we moved out in May. And, you know, not only did we want to get out of school at the time, but was a happy time for us. My father was a fisherman, a real fisherman, you know. And, you know, no matter how much pressure was on to stay in and educate, you're coming. It's fishing time, and that's it.
We used to go to Point Poo, what we call Point Poo, which is across from Bonne Island, which I'm very familiar with because we used to go there and play with the kids. When we moved, of course, everything went. Like the whole household was moved, right down to the plants, the lamps, the dogs, because this is dog team era. What I'm talking about for transport was boat or dog team. That was it. And so the dogs went out, you know, everything. There was nothing left in the house, only the shell. In later years, like a few years down the road, my dad was able to build beds, like the frames and like little benches, you know, instead of taking the chairs, and he built the table and all that. So then it was less to move, and managed to be able to get a stove, so he didn't have to move that. But originally we had to take the stove in the chimney. Like, imagine, like, it was like this boat was like full.
Growing up in Five League was just, we had three families of Griffins, and it was just fun. We just had lots of fun as children, and I remember what we call moving out, and I remember Mom's cabbage. She would always have cabbage and turnips and carrots and all those things, and she would put them up in the nose of the boat. And the cat in the bag, and I remember the old motorboat just shaking and jiggling, and the poor little plants was doing this, you know, all the way out. It was just amazing.
Back in the day, we moved from St. Paul's to Sand Bay for fishing. We'd all get ready. We have to pack everything up in the house. We had feather beds then, so we tied them up in blankets. So we had to take all our beds, all our dishes, tables and chairs, everything. They had to bring the boat into the beach. And the last thing we put in was the dogs. We'd all get in and we take off. And my mom was scared. She never liked the boat too much. She only got in the boat to move out and to come back, move back in.
So, you know, it took a while to get out there, an hour or more to get to the island, but it was something to look forward to, you know, the big move.
If you move out in June, dim days, there was lots of ice around, so sometimes you get stuck in ice, and so maybe we'd had to do some little adventure on a little island, checking out gulls' nests and eggs and that sort of thing. That was fun.
When we'd get to Sand Bay, well, then we had to offload everything. And we were all excited, the kids. I mean, we didn't mind because it was fun for us. So then we'd all help, though. Everybody helped. Everybody helped to bring everything up to the other house. And
we always make this agreement with Dad. Once we get there, I guarantee you we're going to help with the chairs and help with all the whole lot of luggage, you know what I mean? Everything. We're make sure we're going to carry it all up, and because there's a lot of work involved in that, you know, you moved everything. And I remember we hit the beach. We would carry up one item and we're gone.
We used the dogs before the skidoos came. The dogs had their place in the boat. 5 husky dogs, right? We always had 1 or 2 that wanted to fight. First, there would be a fight, the dog fight in the boat. And then some of them want to jump in the water. Sometimes they didn't, but you put them back. They were always attached to it. We had them attached with a rope. And when they landed, the dogs, when they were released, they were happier than we were, I think. They ran over the islands. They ran, and, you know, and it was a really exciting time, let me tell you. A boatload of dogs, kids and cats, we had it all.
And there's another film about seasonal migration, and Garland has already talked a little bit about it, but it features Garland. It's called Eskimo Island. And the name, of course, is no longer appropriate, and probably the government will change it at some point to the Inuktitut name, but it remains for the moment Eskimo Island.
If God had to give me any place to live and grow up, she couldn't have given me a better place than Eskimo Island. What I think about Eskimo Island now mostly is my memories, and I pick bake apples, I pick red berries, I pick blackberries, I pick blueberries, and every spring I'll go out on the rocks where my mom used to fish and I used to fish. I grew up on that island. I lived there all my life as a boy. It was so peaceful, so tranquil. You didn't see anything except the birds were in the ponds, the lanceries, we call them lanceries, they're greater yellowlegs, curlews or whimbrels. That was their habitat, and we seen it as a boy. I seen that habitat, and I loved that habitat. You see, on Eskimo Island, this is the old coal storage. This was the fish plant that I knew when I was a boy. And my dad was, well, he ran the coal storage. He was the guy in charge. He was the boss of the coal storage. This old plant here had an elevator with 2 stories where they take the salmon up and down. This was used for processing trout and salmon. You know, the boat used to come in from Montreal about once every 2 weeks, and that was the North Pioneer when I was tiny. The locals would dress up to go to Eskimo Island when the boat would come. Everything had to be proper. when the boat would come in, it was big excitement. Everybody'd come in to pick up their supplies, whether it was mail, whether it was freight for their store, grocery stores. And they'd all go back to Salmon Bay, back to Stick Point, or up the whole fort, or out to Bonnie. So it was quite a little hub. Like, I always fished trout. My mom was a fisherman, and we had sea trout used to come out of the river. So I fished sea trout, and up in the ponds behind the river that supplied that plant with water, there was trout. So when I was probably 7 years old, with Mr. Semino on the North Pioneer would come in, and he'd ask if I had some trout. Sometimes he'd give me $1. And with $1 then, I was rich. And he was the purser on the boat. I used to call him Mr. Cinnamon Roll. I couldn't pronounce his name, and Mom used to make cinnamon rolls, but his actual name was Mr. Semino. And when Mr. Semino come in, oh boy, I'll tell you, when I'd walk on that wharf, I wasn't very old. I'd probably 6, 7, 8 years old. But when I'd walk out on that wharf with that big ship tied up with all the men on that ship, I was proud as any kid that ever walked the face of this earth with my little bounty of trout and everything else. And Mr. Semino, God bless him, I'll never forget him. When the tanker would come in and fuel up the tanks on Eskimo Island, she was huge. And I used to get so scared because they'd connect the pipes and they'd always have gasoline, and Mom was terrified of fire. And Mom used to always say, my God, if they ever light a spark out on that wharf, it's going to blow everything up. And what I do, I go up on the hill and stay up on the hill until the tanker, because Dad and them, you know, being so casual about smoking cigarettes, they'd be smoking cigarettes and throwing them, and I figured, my God, this place is going to blow up anytime. Somewhere later started transition from a cold storage of salmon and trout to a salt processing place. But right now it's being what they call put back to nature. And they're taking in the old wharf, they took down the old buildings. It's like us, you know, we go back to nature. Being on that island, for a kid, for me, it'll never leave me, and it's the best memories of my life. You know, if you want to see heaven here on earth, well, you know, when I was a boy, that was heaven here on earth, living on that island. Okay, it's me. Yeah. Okay, changes in the fishery. This is tough. This is not easy. Eileen's husband is a fisherman. More so than me. I quit fishing about 10 years ago, but what I've seen the last 10, 15 years, the capelin don't come. The capelin are small fishes that come before the capelin, the cod, and then the cod would come with the capelin. Changes in the fishery, it's been kind of something that as a coaster, you know, this coast was built with the cod fishery and everything else, and now to see it the way that it operates now, the crab have taken over somewhat. It's more lucrative than cod fishing ever was, but that's so unpredictable now with prices and things going on within. They say it's climate change, a lot of it, but I think a lot of it's got to do with overfishing, the mismanagement of the fishery. It's pretty tough for us as coasters to look at this without not feeling some sort of, you know, you're looking at this like it's biblical, the way that you see the transformation that's taken place. Right?
People have left.
Yeah, people have left. And I was a kid. My dad always told me, Garland, there's no future on the coast. My dad told me that when I was a kid in school, that, you know, that look elsewhere for, and I did. I moved, I went out west, I worked in British Columbia, I fished in British Columbia, got to know that old coastline, loved it. But I got lonely. I had to come back. And I think it was the best thing ever happened that I did come back. And then when I did come back, I got tired of, I didn't want to fish anymore. I wanted to be more, take on other things. I was always interested in archaeology, anthropology, read a lot. And then the archaeology started to come from Laval mostly in the beginnings. And I got to work with the archaeologists, and it really, and then Louise came around that same time, and I got to work with Louise, and then I started to be more that I was into something that I enjoyed a lot more, research and aspects like tourism and all that. So it took me away from the fishery, and I was happy it did, because I didn't want to be in the fishery because I was getting sad in there. I was seeing things that I didn't like, and I wanted to be away from it. And it's been tough there with the museum. It's something that you talk about changes in the fishery. Well, the diversity, and we looked at different ways of economic development, and I figured that tourism was would be one of the economic engines that go forward in moving things forward. But now the last couple of years with climate change, it's been that's been kind of difficult. So it seems like you go from one challenge after the other, but adversity has always been with people on the coast. We've always struggled, and we're not out of it yet. And Eileen and I have a tough time with the museum, just being volunteers and trying to make things, make it so that it's a good product that sells to the customers. They're happy. We feel that. I love marketing my little village of St. Paul's River and the life, the history, and all that. And thank God I've got Eileen. Eileen is from Montreal, but she's one of these people that I find it so easy to work with, and she's engaged in the heritage and culture and being a principal itself. But the fishery, I can't say too much about the fishery as a fisherman. It's just something now that is what it is. And so I'll just leave it at that for what it is.
I think one thing too, you could maybe just add though, is as you've seen through these videos, I mean, people of the coast are very resilient people. I mean, their lives are not easy, yet they love where they live. And I think a lot of people have left the coast through the downturn of the fishery, and we're seeing some returns with remote work. Some of the younger people are able to come back. It's still home. So often, we're seeing in the last 5 years, probably some of the younger people have gone out to get their education and they're wanting to come back. So we're seeing some diversity there in the economy. And I think, as Garland said, tourism is definitely possible. Of course, where we live, it's remote, it's hard to get to. But now with the Trans-Labrador Highway, there's more and more. We're seeing more and more people. And I think more and more people are starting to discover this little part of Quebec that's virtually unknown. So
and I think a lot of them left because they were like me. They looked for another life. Most of them, they went out and they can actually afford to come back now, build homes, and just maybe live out their lives in the villages and feel that they still have a connection to the coast. It's not the same coast, but I think my next phase is on.
Just before you go on though, it's just maybe mention that Quan, we did get funding from Quan for Louise to do a film about the Belonging and Identity Project, and it's a longer film, so we can't show it. So it is on the website. I think, Louise, you were going to mention a link to it, or you're on mute.
Okay, so I'll go now and I'll finish up.
Just Louise.
Sorry, I was on mute. Early in the chat box, Eileen, I put the link. We can say it now, though. It's the Whiteley Museum, and it's the MIA Explore project. And the film is called, it's also on my website, louiseabbott.ca. So it's called St. Paul's River, the Once and Future Village. So it very much looks at what Garland has been talking about.
Exactly.
Of the collapse of certain fisheries and the departure of people and the attempts by people remaining or coming back to diversify the economy and keep the coast going.
Right. Yeah, now you can.
Okay, now we get to uncovering the past, and this is something that when I was a kid, I've looked at things I've always been fascinated by history, always will. And anyway, when I was doing my research on things, when we left there was almost like we had no history. When I was a kid in Sherbrooke at 13, it was like we were studying other people's history. And it's like the coast was somewhere then. When I went to Sherbrooke to go to school, the coast didn't exist. It was like, where are you from? And we talked like Newfoundlanders. We were, because my grandmother was a Newfoundlander. And not, even though I'm Nato, my ancestors came from the Quebec side. But we had a hard time explaining that we were from the lower North Shore. It was like someplace that nobody knew about. So that was tough on us as kids. We had no identity. And then to even think that we had an history, that was impossible. So anyway, when I went to Bishop's that one year, I did a paper on the fisheries. And when I was doing my paper on the fishery, I'll never forget, I think it was Errol Innes, he talked about the fishing fleets that used to come over and fish around Newfoundland. And then, gee whiz, I started to say, there's not only fishing around Newfoundland, there's fishing around the lower North Shore. And I said, wow, you know, and you talk about the British fleet, the French fleet, the Spanish. And I was saying, gee, we got an history. So I was kind of saying to myself, gee, there's something to us. We have an history. I didn't have a clue. So anyway, I started to delve a little bit deeper, and then I got in the Jacques Cartier's Voyage of Discovery. And then he talked about coming through the Strait of Belle Isle, coming to Blanc-Sablon, and then coming to this port of Brest. And gee, I started to say, when I did all the reckonings of the leagues and everything else, that Brest seems like it's pretty close to where I am. So I started to do my research, and then I was still being young. I used to drink and everything. So I'd go to the bars and everything, and I started talking about Brest, and all the people or kids around my age say, Garvin's got something wrong with him. He's always talking about history and Jacques Cartier and Brest. We don't want to talk about that. We want to talk about anything. So for a while, I thought I was a nutcase because I was going on with all this stuff. And but I knew I was on to something. And then lo and behold, I came home in 1980, and then around that time, the archaeologists started to come, Louise started to come, and then these people were started to say, well, we had some history, and we had some things that maybe give us a source of pride, that we weren't just detached from everything that we were, that we had no connection to. And so anyway, I was fascinated, and they started to engage me, and I was engaged by them. And this is where I started to dig deeper and deeper. The deeper I got, the more people that came to me. So I became, a lot of them told me that when they'd come down, there were students too that were doing masters and PhD, and they'd say that when they come in the village, the people would say, well, go see Garland Netta. He knows the history, and he knows that. So I got to meet everybody, and I was really excited by it. To be honest with you, it's been some of the best memories of my life the past 20 years, 30 years. And because I got involved. And then lo and behold, Bill Fitzhugh came one year, and I was telling Bill about Brest and
from the Smithsonian.
Yeah, from the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. And so I said, Bill, there's more air than what you're saying. And, a lot of these archaeologists, I always refer to them as being too professional. They know too much for what their intent is sometimes. So I started to say things to Bill, and Bill go, yeah. And then like the fishermen, the people started to find things around Bon Esperance Harbor, like in the water, bass tiles, cooking implements, things like that. And so we started to make some discoveries. So then the Smithsonian engaged the University of Montreal, Professor Brad Lowen, who had finished up for Parks Canada their research and work at Red Bay, which is the World UNESCO Heritage Site at Red Bay, Labrador, which is a 2-hour drive from here on the Labrador. And we started on Bonne Espérance Island to find, well, not we, they did. I left them alone after they started to do their own thing. So the University of Montreal with the diving teams, they started to find these bass whaling sites on Bonne Espérance. And the bass whalers, that's 500 years ago. So Bonne Espérance Island has got a local history with Mr. Whiteley for the invention of the cod trap that goes back with the American schooner fleet and Nova Scotian schooner fleet and Newfoundland schooner fleet, probably 200 or 300 years. But before that, and that's where my mother grew up. This is where my family, it's Bossy Whiteley that brought over my mother's side of the family. So I was quite proud of it. And then lo and behold, everybody showed up. Louise Abbott came back. We got Louise back. The Smithsonian was there, the University of Montreal. So the last, 5 years, I guess, 6 years.
6 years.
Like we've had quite a.
We've been fortunate having projects accepted by our MRC, the Gulf Saint Laurent funding to help support the Smithsonian, the archaeologists, and Louise to do these projects and to document some of these amazing findings. Because as you said, Bonne Espérance Island was Whiteley, but it's been used by peoples for over 500 years, right?
No, absolutely.
The Basque site actually predated Red Bay, I believe Dr. Fitzhugh said, right?
Yeah, well, it's got some things that, yes, still have to be investigated. But anyway, it's been really interesting. Eileen is giving out all the acknowledgements. I'm not the best at acknowledgements, but anyway, we have to do that. But no, it's been really interesting. And I like to focus on the things that are, fundamental to us as a people moving forward. And one of those fundamentals now with the changes in the fishery is that we've got to make this, this little museum somehow the cultural center of the Trans-Labrador Highway, and we're like tourists are coming in, and we've got a viable product. So I'm all excited, and thanks to Quam tonight, I'm going to give an acknowledgement here to Quam that this is really something for us. It's something that we haven't done before on any scale, but it's kind of neat to be welcomed and to have a few opportunities to express and convey some of the exciting things that are happening. I don't know. I got to be honest with you. It's tough. It's hard work. It takes a lot. These things are not just something that evolve. Because it's a lot of hard work. Eileen and I have really struggled to keep this place afloat. So I got to be honest. I don't know if the Whiteley Museum, I hope it don't have to close again, which it did for a previous time before we took it and undertook it. But I want to see some continuation of history. And this is why I feel with Louise Abbott and the work she's done now, we put some good things out there, some interesting topics that can make this very exciting moving forward in the future.
I think so too, and it's kind of we always say the stars have aligned. We had Louise, we had Dr. Fitzhugh from the Smithsonian, we had from Dr. Bradlow, and we've had a lot of grad students are very interested in trying to develop this history. And, if you build it, they will come. If we want people to come here, we have to have the product. And Louise doing these films and working with Donna Sinclair and the Mia Explorer, like we're trying to get the digital, our digital footprint so people can actually see and learn about the culture and heritage of Bonne Esperance, and then maybe come. And if they can't come, at least they've learned. The educational piece is important. We've always been a great partner. Our the Littoral School Center has been a great partner for us, as well as, they say it takes a village to raise a child. And we've had a lot of great partners. The MRC, the Coasters Association is always there to support us, our local municipality, the Case Populaire, and like having Louise, it's just been a gift. So, and
I got to say too, that working with some of these characters like Professor Brad Moon, some of these professors, I got to tell a little story. It'll take a minute, but you got to get to know them too. So anyway, one day, Professor Brad Lowen, he was staying at one of the residences that Eileen had secured from the commission scholar. And he said to Garland, let's go out to visit the Smithsonian boat. The Smithsonian had a boat where they took up all the kids from the States and they stayed on the board. He said, let's go to the fish plant and go see Professor like William Fitzhugh. So I go out with him. we drive out in these vehicles. When I get there, it gets around supper time. I look around and I say, I want to go home and get something to eat. And I look around and there's no Brad Lowen. And everybody starts to smile and say, when I said, well, I looked at myself, they were all laughing. And I was going, well, gee, what's so funny? And anyway, Professor Brad Lowen had already left and come in, that he supper and forgot about me. So I got some of the ladies to drive me in. Then when I was coming in, he realized that he had finished his supper and he'd forgotten about me. So he was on the way back out to the fish plant to pick me up. So it hasn't always been, but it's been a lot of fun. I got to tell you that working with these people has been exceptional. And like tonight, this has been exceptional. And thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Could I just add an acknowledgement? I'd like to acknowledge my husband, Niels Jensen. Niels and I went together to the coast in 2022. And I'd also like to acknowledge my long-standing colleague, Vito, who might still be on the road. He was out here working with me today. And he came with us to the coast in 2023. So he got to see it for the first time then. And it's wonderful working with both of them. So I thought I should acknowledge them as well. Niels doesn't have a camera in his computer, so you can't see him tonight, but he's there watching you.
Yeah, and I'd like to say to Niels and Vito too, that you've been exceptional. Vito, you did great work with Louise.
And Niels helped a lot with the new interactive display that we've got going. I know he helped our carpenter, Edward Griffin, to do that. So yeah, we've had a lot of great people. This is so that's actually a picture of the interactive map.
Yeah, thanks to Louise.
Again, it was serendipitous. Louise, you bumped into your friend Douglas Dunbar, who used to be the museum curator or designer over Newfoundland. So he was a part of this project, and it's just spectacular. It's really.
We have I think there's another visual that shows it in the museum.
There we are. Yeah, and look who's on the screen,
Yeah.
Mr. Nat.
Well, I didn't take that photograph, Rob.
I just kidding. Yeah, but it's beautiful though. It's beautiful. So when you click on the button, one of the Louise's videos clips of the different islands will show up. So if Garland isn't in the museum, people can still hear the stories of the islands.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, this has been a wonderful presentation. Bravo to you three for bringing us to Bonne Espérance and St. Paul's River. And there's been so many comments on the side. I'll read some of them to you. And while I do that, if you're on our Zoom chat tonight, you can certainly turn your cameras back on. Thank you for keeping them off during the presentation. And if you have a question, you can use the raise hand feature, or you can go old school and wave your hands around. We're okay with that too. Here's some of the comments that are coming in though. This is from Lorraine Beaton. I'm from Verdun, lived in LaSalle for years, but now living in Northern Quebec on a Cree reserve in Mistissinique Lake, where I worked and lived for almost 35 plus years. So we're reaching a lot of people. There's hello, Sister Eileen. I think you know who that is, Eileen. Jody's turning in from Sherbrooke. Judith Land says, happy to be here from Manitoulin Island, Ontario. That's cool. There's a great presentation, very interesting. Roni says, very interesting. How many people live in your community?
How many people?
420, 430.
Is that number sort of been a steady over the years?
Yeah, it was about the same when I'd say when I left here in 1969 to go to Alexander Galt Regional High School, it was around 400. So we've been pretty constant in maintaining our little village population.
I think too, you mentioned like we're on the eastern sector of the Lower North Shore. So from Old Fort to Blancmont, we're connected by road. So our area has probably not been as badly affected as some of the more remote villages on the coast.
Yeah, and I got to say too, Heather, that I just want people to know that people talk about the dog teams. And when I was a boy, we had to be careful. Like Tony Roberts, one of the guys that was interviewed there, he was chewed up by the dogs. He was lucky that he even survived because they dragged him under a house and they almost had him. So when we were kids, that's things that you don't ever talk about. That's kind of interesting stuff today. But I remember bringing bread sometimes to my mom's friends, and the dogs would be looking at you. I don't know how I'm still like a lot of us are still there, because those dogs were wolves. They were huge.
They
I
weren't
suppose
pets.
they had to keep wild, didn't they? It's in order to be strong and to do the job.
Well, in the
to be-
winter, when we'd get minus 30, 40, they'd have their little, and the snowdrift, I still remember them. They'd be coiled up because they stayed out all night. I don't know how they ever survived, and the snow would be drifted all around and they'd be all in a ball, but those are wonderful memories. Sometimes I'd like, if Louise gets, and Louise can get a little thing together, I'd like to get some of us that know, have those memories, just to talk about those dogs and what they meant and how important they were to these little villages.
We have a question from Andrew, and I'll get, you'll be unmuted in just a sec, Andrew. There you go.
Great. Okay. 2 questions. One comment. I got to say that I was with Alliance Quebec back in the day. I had just come back from spending a couple of years in Newfoundland, and I went to the conference at John Abbott in, I guess, 1986, maybe. And the best people were the coasters. I had so much fun with them. It was fantastic. Just put on hang on, put on the video here. Yeah, I'm in my kitchen, Kamarask. I don't know if you people got the wind that we did today, but it was pretty rough.
Yes.
The tides were pretty high. Anyway, I was going to ask if there was anything, I'm involved with the Task Force on Linguistic Policy, and I know that the coasters are always forgotten. And if there's anything that we can do, I'd love to be able to do it. And you can get in touch with me anytime. My email is on our website, which is www.thetaskforce.ca. It's so you can also get me at. I'm sure Louise has my number because she sent me the information on the video, which was just fantastic. And the meeting here has been incredible. I cannot believe how, as somebody said, how resilient you are, how positive you are. I've got a personal question though. I've been planning for a number of years cycle down the North Shore to go from Kamarask over to Vieux-de-Loup, Tadoussac, and then down the North Shore. Where is the best place go before the road starts getting pretty rough to take the coastal boat? Would it be St. Paul's River, or is it Natashquan, or what is it? I don't have a fancy bike. I got a decent bike for roads, and it's got pretty good tires, but it's not going to take gravel.
Well, the road only comes as far as Kagaska, coming down the coast. So then you'd have to get onto the Bella de Gagne, and then that would take you visit. And then you could get off you're off the boat if you wanted to continue your cycling at it goes to Blanceval, right? Yeah, you'd have to go to Blanceval.
No, I would go to. I've never been to Lansa Meadows, and I've done all of Canada. I did Newfoundland a couple of years ago, and the guy I was with wanted to go to Gross Moon, and we didn't have time, and I wanted to go to Lansa Meadows, so I wanted to take the coastal boat to Blanc-Sablon, and then from there go across to St. Anthony.
That's a beautiful trip.
Yeah, you'd have no problem. All you'd have to do when you get in Arve-Saint-Pierre from Seven Islands, the coastal boat stops in Seven Islands. It starts in Rimouski, stops at Seven Islands, it comes down to Port Menier on Anacostia, and then it starts stopping in Natashquan, all the little coastal communities. So you'd get to see all the little communities. Then you could get off in Lourdes. Then if you were still on your bike, you take the ferry across to Newfoundland. It's only 45 minutes an hour. And then you're not too far away from Lansa Meadows, the Viking site over there.
Oh, I see. I was thinking I wanted to get into Labrador, though. I want to cycle into Labrador and take that.
Yeah, if you wanted to go to Labrador, you'd want to go see
Red Bay.
like Red Bay, because
exactly. I don't want to keep you too long, but anyway, so I just want to warn you that I'm probably going to be down. I might be down there this summer to check out your museum.
Well, get in touch with us before we can help you out with some arrangements.
Yeah,
that would be great. That'd be fantastic. All right.
Thanks, Andrew. That's great. I'm sure they'll help you out a lot up there. Nancy Green says, the people of the Lower North Shore have exemplified resilience time and time again. Despite the myriad of challenges we encounter, our spirit remains unbroken. We are a community of innovators, always finding ways to overcome obstacles with determination. Well said, Nancy. That's a nice comment. And then, of course, Allison has posted up the link to the Whiteley Museum's online multimedia project, and I have checked it out. It's wonderful. So you have to go there, click on that link, and then, of course, other great comments have come in. Could not have found a better promoter of your heritage and history than Garland. And the work in the museum with Eileen and seeing your lovely location through the eyes of Louise and Niels and Vito. Wonderful. That's from Judith Land. Thank you, Judith. And I have a quick question for you. What makes Mr. Whiteley's cod trap so different than any other cod trap before? I know nothing about cod fishing. So in a nutshell, can you explain why his cod trap was so innovative?
Well, they used to use seines where they'd have to cast a seine,
Like a net.
like a net.
A big,
and
big
then
net. Yeah.
And then they'd scoop up from the bottom and they'd draw all the cod in there. But his invention, and because of the capelin, the small fish that come into the beaches to spawn.
You have to explain what a cod trap is.
Yeah, I am. But the small capelin that come in to spawn, they come right into the beach. So Mr. Whiteley's invention, the cod follow the capelin and they'd come right to the land. So Mr. Whiteley knew this. So he had what he called a leader that attached to the land. And that came out.
A net.
It was a net that came out from the land, and then there was a square box. And in that, they had what they call doors with an opening. The cod were in there, and then the cod was sort of what you call the V's on the cod. And they'd swim around and around and around. Once they were inside of that enclosure, they couldn't find their way out, so they just go around and around and around in a circle until daylight the next morning when the codfishers would go out and they'd pull up those doors. And sometimes they'd have enough cod in that. Not only themselves, like they always, if they had extra, they supplied the extra people around. So it was a simple device, but very unique in the concept of it made things available to everybody. They didn't have to, even the local fishermen could use it. So it was a brilliant invention. And I got to say something. Francisco Riviera is our postdoctorate student that did work and research here. So Francisco's there. So we just want to acknowledge.
Yeah, did some great work. Hope to see you back again sometime.
We saw a picture of him with Garland looking on earlier. I wanted to mention, Heather, it was a fixed type of fishing gear. So that was fishermen, it liberated fishermen to do other things while the trap was fishing on its own. So that was another of the advantages.
Yeah, I mean, it was easier, but they still had a hard life.
Well, they
doing
did
all the rest.
You couldn't set or haul in the cod trap, in certain weather conditions either. But there's still people now who feel that if people had continued with the cod trap instead of the offshore fishery, you would have had more people fishing. It would have had a more sustaining effect on the economy. But instead, they went to the offshore fishery and the big trawlers and so on. So there are people that still feel that if they'd stayed with the cod trap, we'd still have cod today. I met people in the 90s when I was working on a film called The Empty Net in Newfoundland in Petty Harbor, the Best Brothers, and they were heavily promoting the cod trap and still using it themselves. But the cod, we know that the cod stocks collapsed in the 90s and they've never really recovered.
They've never recovered. Yeah. It's so sad. It's sad to hear you talking about that, Garland, the effects of climate change on your community. And you would notice it very quickly because you're right there and living off the sea, and you see the changes in the land and the temperature, and it's very distressing.
I got to say to you, Heather, that for me, it's not only distressing, it's something that I think I lived in denial. I didn't want to, for the last couple of years until this year, I think I just said, well, it's just something that's going to change. But now I realize it's changing us. It's not going to change, and we have to adjust and adapt. And I don't know how we just make that adjustment. It's going to be tough.
It affects the coast because, like as we said, we're connected by road, but the isolated villages, they use it's a route blanche in the winter. Skidooing is how they get between villages, and it's been a very popular tourist attraction too. People will, actually take a skidoo and travel from Kagaska all the way down to Blanc-Sablon. It's beautiful scenery. But the last couple of years, it hasn't been safe. There hasn't been enough snow. So it's affected not only tourism, but the local people who live here can't get back and forth between villages. They're still isolated. And if you've ever checked out the price of a plane ticket, it's as you could go to Europe cheaper than you could come to the coast.
And I'll say something else too about the gentleman before that talked about the Lanza Meadows, which is the Viking settlement. I don't know if he's aware of this, but the Vikings lived in Greenland 1,000 years ago. And because of the little ice age at the time, climate change, they had to move back to Scandinavia. And if you go to Greenland, you can still see the remnants of where those Vikings lived. So that's interesting from that perspective, that climate change has always been a factor. But I think this man-made one now, it's something that it's kind of got a different sort of connection to it.
Yeah. I see Nadia has been waving her hands around. Sorry, Nadia. We can unmute you if you're there. Is she there, Allison?
That's me.
Oh, hi. There you go, Nadia.
Hi. I just wanted to say a shout out because, of course, I know Louise from a very long time ago, and it's just wonderful to see how well this has all come to fruition. And of course, I know Eileen as well, and I know Garland. So hello to you all. Lovely, lovely presentation. I'm so glad I was able to witness this. Thank you.
Thank you for putting us back in touch with Louise.
Yeah.
Yes. Eternal gratitude for that, Nadia.
Yes.
I'm so happy that it happened. It's wonderful.
Thanks, Nadia. Thank you.
Okay.
We could keep on going and going, but I promised our speakers we would be ending around 8 o'clock. So we've exceeded our time. But so I think I'll bring the evening to a close. But I just wanted to say thank you so much to the three of you. It's been fascinating, and I'm not sure if I have. I wanted to know what salted cod tastes like, but I can save it for another time when I'm speaking to you. I'm sure it tastes terrible. I'll come and visit. But it's been really delightful. You're such all three of you are so engaged in your community and love your museum, and I hope the best for it. And for sure, all the people that are watching, I mean, if you're ever doing fundraising, or I'm sure people would be very supportive and would love to help you out in some way. So I encourage everybody to connect into the Whiteley Museum through their website. Do you have a Facebook page too? And we can all.
We do. It's not always active. That's one of our areas we got to get a little bit better at, is social media. But before you go, I just really want to thank you, Heather and Allison at Quan, to put this together. It's been super.
Oh, it's been our pleasure. And I'd like to thank everybody for joining us tonight. And I'm sure if you have questions, you can always contact the Whiteley Museum. Eileen and Garland would be happy to answer your questions through their Facebook page. I'm sure that would be a great way to connect in with you. And if you're interested, we have one more presentation to come in our Heritage Talk series. It's next Thursday. It's called Being South Asian in Quebec. It's on a New Line exhibit from the Rang Collective by Sunita Nigam. So that's March 28th at 7 o'clock right here on Zoom or on Facebook Live. And you can find all the Heritage Talk series. You can watch this one again if you'd like on our Facebook page, and you can register for our next presentation too. So again, thank you, Allison Kirkwood. She runs all the tech for us. It's so nice to have someone doing that so we don't have to worry. And thank you, Louise. Thank you, Garland. Thank you, Eileen. And thank you to you all for joining us tonight on Heritage Talks. So until next time, take care and good night.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you.